Timecode Cowboys, the best podcast of all motherfucking time.
All right, well, welcome back to the pod. Here we are, almost 10 episodes in, and it's surprising. Wow. Yeah, it took this long for us to finally score our biggest guest yet.
So we have a well-oiled machine before you brought me
Exactly.
in. I appreciate that.
We wanted to make sure everything was up and running at optimal condition.
It's a good rehearsal for me.
Exactly, yeah. So I guess in the way of an introduction, I have known Mr. Crescenzo Notarile.
You said that very well.
I did? Okay.
Yes, Notarile.
Notarile. That's the, half Italian flair that I got.
That's true.
I've known him, oh my gosh, probably since high school.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe before.
Yeah.
Really?
But,
wow.
Yeah. Crescenzo is a very accomplished cinematographer, photographer, artist, all-around Renaissance man.
Thank you.
So I'm surprised. Again, it took us this long to get you on the pod because you're kind of a natural choice, and you've known Alec for quite a while.
And you've been busy too. I tried to get you on my other pod.
Yeah.
Yes. Unfortunately, very, very busy until recently.
Yes.
Strikes. That's another story.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
let's maybe start with how you guys first met, because I think that's the nexus point for how I met Crescenzo.
I'll just let everybody know how the two of us came to know each other, and then I'd love to talk a little bit about sort of bleeding into my old podcast or other one, just about kind of what got you enthusiastic about being a filmmaker, because you had different pathways in your career.
I did.
But the two of us, Crescenzo and I, met on CSI. And gosh, how many years?
The mothership one.
The
CSI
mothership.
Las Vegas.
Yes, the original,
William
the OG.
Peterson.
Right.
Yep.
Let's make that clear, because there's been a lot of spin-offs.
And even a spin-off of itself.
Right.
They redid it.
Oh, yeah.
Which was odd.
They went full circle.
They did. But we collaborated, I don't know how many episodes together, and it was really fun.
It was quite a few, and I was lucky to be with you for most of that.
We did quite a bit,
We did quite a bit together on the roster, so I was lucky. I was fortunate for that.
Yeah.
And I think
out of all the directors, Alex Smite was the one I worked with the most.
I think so, yeah. And I got to do your first episode on the show too, which was a blast. And
you were very gentle with me. I appreciate that. That went a long way in my book. You held my hand. You made sure I was in good hands, and I was.
So
it was a thrill. It was a thrill.
Yeah,
I could always tell the difference. I mean, because from my vantage point, you were at your peak directing years when I was like finishing high school, and I didn't actually meet Crescenzo probably until some sort of family function, or maybe it was when I graduated. Yeah. I mean, I also came to visit. So
Danny, when you came to set, was that your first time on a set, on a film set?
Well, like at that stage,
when I was on Chicago Hope, I think you came.
But I was too young to really grasp.
Yeah, but you were there.
I think the years you were on CSI were pretty magical, because I was old enough to kind of know I was obsessed with film and liked it, and could notice things and kind of understand what was happening. When I was, when you were on Chicago Hope, it was cool, but I was so young.
Having done that too as a kid.
It's a very impressionable time when you're a small boy being on set, and I remember very vividly my time.
Yeah, what was
set.
your first time on set?
Well, it was a photography studio. My father was a very famous art director in the field of advertising. He was a true madman. His work is in a permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art. And one of his famed acclaims was, you're too young for this, but you would know this, Alec, was the high karate commercials.
Oh, hell yeah.
Way back when.
I had some high karate.
You put on this cologne, it was called high karate, and you put on this cologne, and then all of a sudden you're fighting off all these beautiful
the girls
women,
off.
right? Because they want you.
Couldn't make that one now.
And it was a
cut to clip of high karate.
The high karate set. Be careful how you use it.
It was very iconic, but my father's photographer back in the day was Richard Avedon, very famous.
We've all heard of
him. Photographer.
I have heard that name.
Richard Avedon.
That's incredible.
So when I was a small boy, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, my father took me to his studios when he was shooting, and I would see Richard Avedon, shoot photography for my father and models and product shots, etc. Of course, I didn't know that was Richard Avedon. I didn't know that. But what I saw was a photographer behind a camera, umbrellas with flashes going off, music playing, beautiful women. And for the first time, that was my womb. Yeah. I want to be in this world. It was exciting to me. And he would take many, many Polaroids. That was his lighting test, and rip the Polaroids off.
Really?
At the end of the shoot, hundreds of Polaroids all over the ground. And as a small boy, I used to swap them all up, put them in my pocket, go home, and look at them. And I have a couple of shoe boxes at home.
Still?
With Richard Avedon Polaroids.
That's crazy.
Beyond crazy. People say, Crescenzo, oh my God, go to Christie's. What are you
I
doing?
was going to say, that must be so
book.
valuable. Yeah.
But 99% of them are all faded and destroyed because, he was just doing it for lighting tests, so he never rubbed the fixer on it.
Right.
To fix them. So they would dissolve after a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
There's a few left, but I was very enamored at that time with photography. I knew right off the bat when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, I wanted to be a photographer.
Yeah.
And my father bought me a little Brownie camera. I think I was 4 years old.
Well, and your dad obviously was visual.
Very visual.
You got started very young then.
I did.
Yeah.
Both of my parents were artists. My father was an art director, but he was also a graphic designer and an illustrator and a painter.
So cool.
My mother was an interior designer and also a sculptress. So I was brought up with 2 artists in the house, and we had a lot of art all over the house. We had a tremendous collection of art books, constantly looking at art books. Yeah. And as I said, my father mostly was my mentor, my inspiration. Everything I've learned was from both of my parents, but mostly from my father. He took me under the wing.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started. So not to ramble, but I knew I wanted to be a photographer ever since I was a small child. So I studied photography, and I was developing photographs 5, 6 years old when I started developing them.
Yeah.
With a Brownie camera. It's a 2 1/4 negative, so it was like that Hasselblad film, 2 1/4. Roll it on a plastic, camera.
Yeah.
I was developing 2 1/4 film in my parents' bathroom at the time, and it was fantastic. I thought I was the mad scientist, mixing chemicals, dark room, and seeing it come to life. I mean, I was enamored.
Oh, your dad must have, both your parents must have been so.
They were thrilled. They were very proud, and I was doing family portraits. That was my thing. I was doing family portraits, and some of them I still have. My first photographs ever.
Yeah.
They were all family portraits. I would pose them. I would really get into choreography of a composition and placement of camera. I was aware of all of that when I was 5 years old.
That's crazy.
My father taught me all of that, and looking at hundreds of books all the time was such a great inspiration. Photography books, painting books, sculpture books.
Yeah.
I knew all the artists, you know, and it was a fantastic thing where my parents would take me to New York City to go to museums. So here I am, 5, 6, 7 years old, going to museums, looking at artwork, appreciating that. So that's how I started, basically. And we'll get into this later, but I was studying photography when I was a small boy all the way through high school. And I won a scholarship to college, full scholarship to college, NYU. Wow. And then I transferred, which we'll get into later, from NYU to New York Institute because I followed a teacher that I super loved. And
I have to just jump in for a sec. Did you, when you were at either school, did it overlap at all into filmmaking at that point, or were you still just focusing on?
I was focusing on photography, still work, and my thing was photo essays. That's what I was doing.
So you're telling a story,
and I didn't know it at the time, but I was doing 5 to 10 photographs of a subject, mostly of people.
Yeah,
and I would tell a story. It was called photo essays. That's a particular genre. And I would be doing these photo essays, telling a story. And my last photo essay I did was a very, very famous person that was living on the streets. He was really famous, playing chess with everyone and winning every game. But he was living on the streets, but he was very smart. And I was intrigued by this. I played him a few times as well. My father taught me chess. And I got enamored with this person that's so smart, but living in the streets like a bum.
Yeah.
So I did a photo essay on him, and that was shown and published in the Newsday newspaper.
Wow. How old were you when you did that?
15.
Wow.
So that's what I was doing. But to cut to the chase, my last year of education in, was it high school or college? It was college, midway through college. I was started with my photography in college. Midway through, one of my professors showed a film to the class. We didn't understand why, because we were studying photography, but he showed a film. And this film, it's very important for this conversation, changed my life. It changed my life literally, from photography to cinematography. That was a very pivotal point. And it was an old Twilight Zone episode. And I believe it was the only one that was French produced. It was produced in France, called Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge.
Yes, it's based on
the
Ambrose Bierce short story about the guy that is on the hangman's noose.
The whole story happens
Civil War
on the way down.
Not that many people know that. I'm very impressed.
It's a great one. You're right, it is a unique one because I think it was independently produced, and then they sort of were like, this is so good.
That's correct.
We're going to wrap it up into the anthology.
That's correct. Yeah. Very smart. Not that many people are aware of that.
I love that one. I think you showed that to me.
It blew my mind.
Yeah.
It literally blew my mind because, as you mentioned, the Civil War, there was a Southern civilian who was caught for trying to blow up a railway bridge, and he was ready to be hung. As you know the story. I have to be careful what I say here because this is, I'm going to give everything away for the film.
It's okay. Spoiler alert. At this point, people will keep watching. They have to know.
This is a major spoil
So
alert.
if you want to watch this episode, hit pause on the podcast here and go watch it. And then
come back in a minute because it's a major spoil alert.
It is. It's sort of it's like spoiling The Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
Should I tell that? Or?
Yeah, you could tell.
Oh, yeah, please.
Because it's a major spoiler alert. So please know that for your audience. Because I'm a little apprehensive telling it. But the reason why I'm telling it is because this is the reason why it changed.
Yeah.
Is the noose is around the Southern civilian's neck. The soldiers are ready to hang him. You have all these poetic, beautiful shots, which captured me as a photographer. You're seeing wind rustling through the trees, a drip of dew falling off a leaf, reflections in the river, in the water. You're hearing wilderness sounds of birds chirping and all of this. It was very poetic, yet a noose is around his neck. It was very poetic. That's what captivated me. And then he gets hung, and he falls, and the camera falls with him from outer space, Earth, to inner space, through the water. And somehow the rope that was tied on him breaks, and he gets loose, and he's swimming. He comes up to surface, gasps for air. He realizes, oh my God, I'm free. I survived. They're shooting at him. Bullets are flying by him. He's swimming for his dear life. And we are led to believe that he is now free, going back home to his family, to his home life throughout this entire adventure. And then at the very end of the film, this is the spoiler alert, so please shut it down for the audience. We come back to that very same scene at the very opening of the film, the noose around his neck, and he gets hung.
So it was
end of film.
Yeah.
So I didn't expect that, and I would never forget. I was silent for a couple of days because it really rocked me.
Yeah.
On the cinema license of telling a story that way that I was not used to in my
your life goes by. It goes by in front of your eyes. It literally his life flashed before his eyes in a split second. It's a great idea.
In a split second, the entire film took place in a split second.
Yeah.
Boom. Wow. I want to be part of cinema. This is telling stories in cinema.
And you were doing that with your photo essays. I mean, you were taking baby steps even at that point.
I was.
But it unlocked something.
It did, very much, Dan. Yeah. Very well said. It did unlock, and it opened my eyes, and it gave me the shivers. It moved me.
Yeah.
It moved me to a point where right off the bat I said, I don't want to be a photographer anymore. I want to be a cinematographer.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I've studied cinematography, and it changed me.
So that was kind of your North Star moment where seeing that for you was like, okay, this is what cinematography and filmmaking can be. This is a peak that you want to reach. It's like, I want to
exactly, Danny. So from that point forward, my eyes were locked now into watching films,
right,
as opposed to looking at art books,
right,
and photography books.
Yeah.
Now I was looking at movies.
Right.
Of course, I watched a lot of films prior to that, but for entertainment.
You see them differently, though.
Yeah,
when you're
totally.
Very differently.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. It was like, I didn't see that before. My eye is now in tune. I appreciate that. And when you have a love for cinema and you want to study cinema and you're watching it now, you're studying it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And when you study it, your appreciation just grows and grows and grows. And there's a trap there because the more it grows, the more, I don't know what the right word is, the more overwhelmed you become because you realize how much you have to learn.
Yeah.
And, oh my God.
It never stops.
Yes.
You know,
That's an interesting thing to bring up because I
never
think
stops.
it does. Yeah, you're right. It constantly humbles you, and like I think the artists I respect and admire are all very much in the same wavelength of like always ready to learn. They're always humbled by the art. There's more to explore. There's more to try. You know, we were talking last week. We all got lunch, and you said you like to keep Turner Classic Movies on, which is great. And I love having the idea of like stumbling upon something, much in the same way as when you were a kid, probably opening up an art book and kind of by accident happening upon something that you maybe didn't. Everything's so curated now. It's hard to just stumble upon something, but it's so valuable. And you were talking about, I think it was the Bergman film, right? Cries and Whispers.
Cries and Whispers.
Yeah, it's just, you know, you're constantly visited with examples of things where you're like, they just did it so fucking good.
You know, it's interesting, speaking of Cries and Whispers,
Yeah.
I was a Bergman freak, as we all were.
Yeah, I went through
studying
a
film
major phase.
in college.
Yeah.
For some reason, we all studied Bergman.
Yeah.
You know, these esoteric filmmakers,
And they're so
Yes.
dark and
Depressed,
depressing and
Nordic.
death. You know, I was a Bergman freak.
Oh, yeah.
But when I saw Cries and Whispers back then, and then I revisited it, as I discussed with you recently at our lunch, and with all the knowledge that I have and all the appreciation that I have from then, my first time to the second time, when I saw it, I almost cried because it was a vastly different film for me because of everything that I've learned, and I was more astute as to what he was doing and the symbolism, the meanings fading to red, and all these characters, the way he was composing, you know, a profile will come into a full face shot, and the way it was composed, you know, and the lighting that Sven Nykvist was doing, and appreciate his lighting. And
well, the thing that, just to jump in real fast, that I found fascinating about a lot of his films too, is that they weren't afraid to have like really sort of stark, unusual images. It wasn't trying to be realistic.
I could see also, I mean,
that was art.
Yes, exactly.
That was their expression.
Yeah.
And for your aesthetic too, not to pigeonhole you into one type of thing, but I think coming from photography, you know, a Sven Nykvist and Bergman combo, like they really are making, like those are like frames that could be hung up on the wall. Like a Cries and Whispers or Persona has that really stark black and white where there's just these shots that they could almost just out of context, out of the film, you put that up on the wall and it's a piece of art.
Listen,
it's like
you get a machine
frame.
that frame grabs stills from a film.
Yes.
Right? You could frame grab 200 frame grabs and make a book like
Yes,
this. And
literally.
put it in a museum.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
You know,
there's
my
just
God.
such a painterly quality to everything they
Very
did
much
together.
so.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you saying that my roots was photography. So when I became a cinematographer, getting into that, I did appreciate very much composition.
Yes.
Composition was Bible to me.
And what was your mantra was always foreground, background.
Midground, background.
That stuck with me though.
Because as a cinematographer, you know, we're watching a screen that's just flat and two-dimensional.
Yeah.
But when you compose a shot that has foreground,
the illusion of depth,
midground, and then the background, you always put your subject that you're shooting in the midground.
Yeah.
Exactly. This all of a sudden becomes this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's the illusion of depth.
Yeah.
Exactly, Alec. And all of a sudden now you have 3D.
Yeah.
You know, you can feel the 3D. You can feel the dimension of a flat frame.
Yeah.
Because of how you compose foreground, midground,
and focus.
background.
All those things come into play.
It's all smoke and mirrors. That's the art of cinematography. This is what we do.
Totally.
To manipulate the mind.
Yeah.
Not in a conscious way. You know, our job is to manipulate the unconscious, the emotion, to have people feel without them really noticing what you're doing. You don't want to be indulgent.
Yeah.
But you want to be indulgent enough to just tug on the emotion.
I would love that you used to come up to me, like if we were doing whatever the particular thing was, and you'd nudge me and go, what's a mood? What do you want to feel like with this guy in here, or this person's apartment or whatever?
And
it was so much fun to talk about it like that.
I would love to hear more about how the two you work
fun.
together, because I think that relationship is obviously so crucial. A director and a cinematographer, that's like, you got to.
That was always, at least
so.
to me, like our initial interaction. Even if it was during prep or something, and usually it was, we'd have a moment with you, and I would sit down and just going over stuff. But I love that your approach was always sort of organic in that way. It was like, what do you want this to feel like, or who
start with an emotion?
Yeah, and then you do
powerful.
all your magic because
But I have to give you praise, Alec, because working with you, your first impulse was always story.
Yeah.
And I was never into story, perhaps, per se, because I was a cinematographer. And I hate to admit this, but often I would watch a film and not even know what it's about when it's over, because I'm so enamored with the visual aspect of things.
I've been there.
I'm looking at lighting. I'm looking at composition.
Yeah.
I'm looking at choices of lenses. I'm looking where the shadows are being casted.
Right.
I'm looking at screen continuity
or
and how
background
it's cut.
people.
I'm looking all
that
this.
was a nice cross.
And the timing of the
But
cross.
yeah, that's all
know?
that stuff's really important.
So I'm looking at this and using it as an education, as a tool
Right.
for me to learn, to understand.
Yeah.
And I always tell young students, when I work, fortunately in our occupation, we do a lot of traveling. And at one point I was traveling all around the globe every week, Concords, New York, London, all over the world.
Is the
I'm doing a
video
lot of
years or
traveling.
your?
Yeah, pretty much the music video years. That
Gotta
was
get into
my
that.
backbone.
Yeah, we got to talk about that
My
too.
ground. So I would tell students this often. And, you're sitting in a plane seat.
Yeah.
There's a headrest in front of you, and there's the monitor of people watching movies. I would never, ever, and I still do this to this day.
I think I do this too. I know where you're going.
Because we're students of cinema, and me more as a cinematographer, it's more visual storytelling than hearing words as a writer would.
Yeah.
And my nephew is a writer. He doesn't look at the visual aspect of telling stories. He's hearing the
radio
words.
play.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Your sensibility shifts depending on your craft.
Yes.
I'm a cinematographer, and I've learned to be very visual. I look at things very visually.
Right.
I don't hear. So my point is, I use these as exercise for educational tools, and I tell this to students: when you're on a plane, shut the sound off. Watch a film with no words. I know writers and to hear it's like blasphemy to even say that.
Yeah.
But if you're studying cinematography, even if you're
I don't
not,
think you get the argument from a director as much as you would from a writer. It feels like without words, they can't tell a story.
I think you're right about that. I think you're right about that, Alec, and I appreciate you saying that with respect to directors. Yes, and you're very much like that. But to understand where a story is going visually, how they're connecting the dots visually from A to B to C, and for you to sit back without hearing what's going on, you're not lip reading or anything like that. You're just looking at the compositions.
Absorbing,
You're looking how the camera's moving. Like for instance, someone could be talking about something very dramatic, maybe killing someone. He's thinking about how to kill someone as a conversation. How do we kill this person? When do we do that? And you taught me this, Alec, which is a very fantastic thing. You taught me this is a very simple move. In the middle of him talking, what is the button of that sentence, of that sequence? What is the button?
Right.
All right. You taught me about buttons. And when I read a script now, I get a highlighter and I highlight to me what the button is, where it really propels a story. And I want to propel that visually as well. Yeah. So in my point of view, my occupation, someone is saying
What's the
something.
most interesting way to get that
and just
main beat, right?
Exactly. But you told me just to move the camera in.
Yeah.
Right. A simple,
subtle
move that a cinematographer does to move a camera in. So what happens?
It pulls your audience.
Exactly. So by the camera going in, right, it's very subconscious. You're not aware of it, but it's floating in.
Yes.
Right. All of a sudden now, you're hearing his lips saying the words, and all of a sudden now the camera's moving in. Now you're inside his skull.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Point of view, right?
Of what he's thinking. It's a fantastic feeling.
Yeah.
You go from outside to now inside the skull.
Yeah.
Well, I think we talked about this because I took this was years and years ago. I took a directing class when I first started editing. And the only takeaway from it was one of those 2 or 3 day things. But the only takeaway that was important for me was something that I did as an editor, which was anytime, or an actor, really, when you go through a script, there's a moment in the scene that's always like the key moment.
Yes.
That's the big takeaway before you move on to the next thing. And so
not everyone knows where that key is when they read a script.
That's true.
That's
it
true.
does. Yeah. You got to have the eye.
Yeah. And so this guy's pitch was sort of figure out what that is, and then decide how you want the audience to see or feel that moment, and then everything else builds outwards from that. So as a way to look at shot listing, I want to be here for that big moment. How do I get there without it feeling like a forced shot that's set up
backwards from
that for everything or other. And I thought and I kind of did that.
That's connecting the dots.
Yeah.
Those emotional dots.
Yeah.
And that's a job
it's sort of
the
emotional
director.
geography, I guess, if there's another way to put it.
And look what you did with your hand when you brought your hand low, right? And that's what I was going to say about composition.
Yeah.
A thing like that where when you're looking at a person and all of a sudden a camera moves in and maybe booms down. Now you're low looking up. Because you're looking up at a character, excuse my voice, because you're looking up at a character, you're now giving them strength.
Yeah.
Right? Gravitas.
Yeah.
Power.
Yeah.
You don't know that physically, tangibly, but you're feeling
feel
that.
it.
Yes.
That's the beautiful thing about cinematography, telling a story by way of cinematography.
Yeah.
What was the great story about Sidney Lumet that's in his book when he was doing 12 Angry Men?
Oh, yes.
They made a real point of, as the story got more intense, the frames
Focal
got
length.
tighter, the focal length were tighter, angles got
You
lower,
felt
you started
claustrophobia.
feeling...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because
Has
there's
a
a movie...
subconscious effect.
Yeah, and the movie takes place in basically one room, and to make that change and feel different, I mean, that's
the beautiful thing about telling stories in cinema is that aspect, and how people react, their emotions, and just the opposing, when you're low, giving them power, coming up, and making them small and diminutive, and weak.
Yes, I'm going to sound like a real film nerd here, but it's
you are
Andrei Tarkovsky, the Russian filmmaker. I think he has a book. It's called Sculpting in Time, which I always thought was such a great way to describe the whole craft. It's just like that is what you're doing in its essence. It's these images it's indicating a passage of time, and there's emotions with it, and it's like such a powerful thing when you see people working at the peak of their craft, and even some people like us. I mean, I'm obviously. According to you, I'm a whippersnapper. I feel like like I've been around the block.
You feel like a wily veteran.
But you can watch it. I watch a movie sometimes, and I get into that cynical mindset where I'm like, oh, they probably use this or that. But it really is great to see something that hits. I mean, it still happens to me where you're just it's back to this thing of being a student.
And I've said this before.
Wow.
For people like us who work in this industry to begin with, it does change the way you can be an audience.
Oh, for sure.
And
absolutely.
And in some ways it's bad because my patient, like if I see something that doesn't work, I register it right away and I'll tune out. But the flip side is when a movie really grabs me, I know it's good. Mm-hmm. And I think you guys probably feel the same way.
Yeah.
But to go back to what you were saying about turning the sound off, I've used that as an example a lot for people. I even do it when I'm cutting. If I get a difficult sequence that's visual,
you taught me that.
I turn all the sound off, and I'll narrate what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
like he's the guy's broken through the lock, and now he's looking to make sure I'm hitting all the beats. I know what's happening without hearing anything.
Putting that aside, Alec, as an editor, was that your main principle when you started to edit? Was to turn sound off and look at the visual aspect, or were you listening to words first?
I started doing it,
cutting on words or cutting on visuals?
I think I started doing it after I'd finished something to see if there was something that jumped out at me and that sound wasn't covering up. But then it became a lot more fun later on to use it as a tool to make sure that the visual storytelling's working.
Well, if I'm thinking back to not to only talk about CSI, but because you guys have that shared experience, it's going to come up. That was a show that, there's not a lot of examples now, again, of generalizing.
Well, that have a lot of quiet visual.
Yeah, because like things are very dialogue heavy now, and I feel like CSI was still, you had these long montages where you have to track with what they're piecing together in terms of like
we had a lot of fun
it's like,
with those, that it's all visual.
Yeah, exactly. You had to communicate a lot, whereas I don't know. Again, I'm not being fair. There is good stuff now, but I would say on the whole, a lot of things that's just that I click on and I'm watching as sort of like a casual viewing thing. It's like they are really, and they'll admit this, they design things now to be kind of like, watch, listen, I'm in the other room, I'm tracking, it's like you're not really.
It's a shame.
It's a pacifier,
Exactly.
But we talked about this last week when we had lunch about William Peterson, who started CSI, and CSI was so successful, in my opinion, because of this one aspect. And you had told the story about sometimes you would see a whole page of dialogue, and William Peterson is supposed to deliver this one page of dialogue, and it reached a point later on throughout the years, put all that aside.
Yeah.
And you watch William Peterson as an investigator go around the room without saying a word, and the camera would follow him. And you get now inside of his skull because of the way the camera's moving,
right?
Taking the audience on that ride.
Yeah, and what is it that you always know that character's ahead of you by a beat?
But you knew exactly what was going on.
Oh yeah,
without the words,
right?
And his expressions, you know, what they call face acting.
Yeah.
You know, thinking, processing.
Yeah.
It became more evocative that way.
Yeah.
Totally.
Rather than force feeding the words.
Exactly.
You know? And that was the success of CSI.
Yeah.
And it's also the ongoing battle, I think, with with any show is that, and this is no knock against writers, because I'm a big fan of writers. I love working with them.
Of course.
On television especially. But there's somebody, this is not a direct quote from me, but there was another editor that said the problem is sometimes the writers in the cutting room, their solution to fix an issue is always adding words. Yeah. And it's not, sometimes it's okay to tell a story with pictures.
Yes.
You know, I mean.
Well, again, it is this medium that is, you know, and you think too, I mean, so much of it comes down to kind of a personal taste level, but also your own unique way in terms of like how you've found your path, right, in this craft. And it's like, I think about you and Crescenzo, and it's like, you had an art background, right? That like by osmosis, even though you made a very conscious pivot to pursue cinematography, you still carry a lot of that stuff with you.
Yeah.
And it's like similar for a writer who's maybe only steeped on text and words. It's like, you know, that brings a certain bearing in terms of like how they are going to approach things. But that's what's great about it, is that it is the melding of those things, and you need to have both, because at the end of the day, someone's watching it on a plane and it's got to.
But I think the thing that sometimes gets lost is that, you know, a well chosen speech can be much more powerful than nonstop dialogue.
Oh, for sure.
Quality over quantity.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting, and I've done surveys of this. When I become friends with actors and you have conversations like this, you put 10 actors side by side, I would almost bet all 10 would say this, and that is less words is better for them.
Yeah.
They all prefer that.
Yeah.
They think telling a strongest story is less words for them. And an actor is studying a script, studying the lines, studying the dialogue. And I used to remember, you know, Guilfoyle on CSI. I mean, it was nuts with Guilfoyle. I mean, he was one of my favorites, but, you know, he would have these long
all the exposition.
Say, right? Okay, we blocked the shot, you know, put tape marks on the floor. We know what we're doing. Okay, they go into hair and makeup, and he's reading his sides, memorizing his lines. And then when first team would come out, you know, the actors from hair and makeup, and we're ready to roll camera, you know, he would change everything. And he would say, I don't need to say this. I don't need to say that. And he would really streamline it to just a few words. That was his thing. I remembered that. Sometimes it would drive us crazy because we're all ready for this.
And sometimes it was the wrong way to go, depending on who was. Yeah,
I understand that, of course. That's why you have to have really
when
control.
He was in a scene with Billy Peterson, that never happened because Paul would do that and go, I think I should do this and say that, and he would go, no, you're going to say this and this, just like it's in there, and he would go, okay.
But the impulse
those words
are
Bible once it's written.
But also
and approved,
Billy had that.
Billy had
that on the. I mean, he was an EP on the show, and everybody knew.
And they respected him.
And you worked with him, you know, he's one of those guys. He's such a nice guy, but he has that. He's one of the guys that comes into a room and he's the cool guy that everybody wants to talk to.
Well, that tracks with
that.
His sort of persona as an actor too. You know, even back to, you know, Manhunter, Michael Mann, and To Live and Die in L.A. It's like he always kind of had this cool as a cucumber sort of simmering.
And it's just who he is. It's like he's a guy from Chicago,
cerebral guy, but but
he's the guy you want to hang out with. He's, you know,
But, you know, there's not many that can walk in and be like, I'm going to cut this.
And he was very photogenic.
He was.
You know, as a cinematographer, he was very photogenic.
I know. I always would love when we'd get ready to shoot something, and then we'd be into a single, and Crescenzo would just be looking at his face. Different.
He had
different
a
actors,
great
but
face,
it was always. It was always fun.
You know,
to see
there's a word that I use often as a cinematographer. It's a good word for cinematographers, and that's called physiognomy. Physiognomy is the bone structure of a face.
The whole thing.
On how it accepts light.
Wow.
Some people have very strong physiognomy. Some people are very flat and they don't have strong physiognomy. they're not photogenic. What makes a person photogenic is they got very interesting, strong physiognomy in their faces, bone structure. That's interesting to look at. That when you light them, it becomes sculptural around them. William Peterson had that.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm aware of that as a cinematographer. To me, I love close-ups.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to overdo a close-up, but when there's a close-up, and you would know this more than anybody, Alec, as an editor, you know, to go to that one,
it should have impact. That's why you can't. That's why everybody overuses them because it's an emphatic cut if it's done properly.
Jonathan Demme had really good close-ups. Him and Tak Fujimoto did some great stuff in Silence of the Lambs. Do you remember the
I got to see.
He just had these really cool. They always, I mean, it's editing too, where
it's really
you're really only coming in for that.
And that's what they're supposed to be.
Yeah,
used.
Anthony Hopkins in the cage.
Oh yeah, exactly. When Lecter. He does great stuff too with
got inside of his skull,
moving into focus. I love that as like a static frame.
I love an actor walking into focus. Yeah,
just simple
or stepping into it.
And I'll tell you something very technically for the audience who appreciate this for cinematographers is when I shoot a close-up, there's many ways of shooting a close-up. I mean, do I go back with a 200 millimeter lens
and then still get here?
And throw the depth of field of the background way out of focus, keep it shallow, but keep it there, but it becomes a little more flat that way.
Right.
I prefer, and most people do that.
Yeah.
They want shallow depth of field, so they get way back with long lenses.
Yeah.
I do just the opposite. When you're trying to button an emotional close-up, is I get in there with a wider lens. Yeah. Not a super wide angle lens where it distorts the face. No, you don't want to distort the faces. That's why when you prep cameras and lenses, you got to be really careful choosing the right proper lenses of distortions and things like that. You know, you watch all these lenses. They each have different characteristics, different personalities. You know how you are as a cinematographer. I want wide angle lenses that do not distort because I know I'm going to come in here. Yeah. I'm going to come in here with a 21 millimeter. I might even come in here with a close focus 17 millimeter. People say, my God, really? You're crazy. 17 millimeter on a close-up, oh my God, it's going to distort the face. It's going to be like comical. But to me, what it does is when you're in close with a wide angle lens, a wider focal length, I should say, not a wide angle lens.
Right.
Like a fisheye, no. With a wider focal length, like a 21 millimeter. Versus a 200 millimeter back there. What it does is this, to me. When you come in close, the face is this way, it's flat. When you come in close, all of a sudden it becomes this way. You feel the sphericalness of the skull, of the head. You feel the shape of it. It becomes more rounder.
That makes sense.
It's not flat like you're looking at a close-up in a magazine. It's flat.
Right.
There's no life to it. It's flat. It looks great, nice lighting. It's flat.
Yes.
But with a wide-angle lens, all of a sudden you have that depth. All of a sudden things start to curve a little.
Yep.
And when you're having a conversation with someone, as we are now with each other, I'm feeling the shape of your faces. It's round to me. I'm not looking at flat faces because we're very close to each other. So I feel your face round. So as a result of that, there's intimacy.
Right.
That's the subconscious emotion that I like to portray in these emotions. Now you feel the intimacy. When I'm back there, and we did a lot of that on CSI because of all the class,
some of it was
lighting tricks, and it was eye candy in the labs. Get back, layer. But when you felt the face, okay, the face is there. It's telling a story, but it's a little on a flat side. So within all of that, find a moment in the context of the sequence where you want to button that emotion, that, oh my God, there's a discovery that they found on looking at a slide or a piece of evidence. There's like a moment where holy shit, this investigation
the nickel
changed.
drops, right?
Yeah.
That's when you want to bring all that. So you're back there, layers, long lens, and there's a discovery of that one sentence. Boom. Come in there with that 21 millimeter.
That was,
all of a sudden, the audience, like you said,
that
you
was
got a little closer.
That was a dictate early on for people that were going to come in and shoot shows, like wide and tight. We don't do medium shots.
That was sort of guideline,
and that was from the very beginning. That was the aesthetic.
So I was going to ask about that because I mean, I don't know at what length you're comfortable discussing it, because I know, obviously the show was very good to both of you, and it was a great tenure you had. So we don't need to name names specifically, but like, how does it work on something like that where the aesthetic is sort of like there is like a Bible, much like a series has a Bible. There's also an aesthetic kind of guideline of like, I think we do this, we don't do that. Like,
I think what you're going for. I could probably answer that pretty succinctly, and then I'd like to get your take too.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Different because I was on board from the very beginning when we were still kind of figuring out what really worked.
And things are evolving, and you're studying how
we were
they're
trying
evolving.
different things.
So you know what's working, what's not working. That's starting to become your Bible now.
Yeah.
And so, we ended up sort of settling, or I should say, collectively, but the stuff in the labs took on kind of a look, which was very much what he was describing.
And it became a signature to
it
the
was
show.
Cool.
Right.
And it was
Very
long
cool.
lenses, lots of stuff in the in the foreground, and high tech. It just had a vibe.
And prisms and all of that, it was fantastic.
But what was fun about that show is that outside of that, your B story basically, or the story of the week, we had way more leeway to do different things, and especially the flashbacks, which I think everybody loved because as filmmakers we could just screw around with.
There was no right or wrong with flashbacks.
Those became kind of like
we
a
were
cool
using
experimental.
hand-crank lenses, the cameras going back
Total
and forth.
creative license.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, but it was the stuff in the lab took on. It had a feel,
right,
and it was important. It's consistent,
very important.
Yeah,
and it became a signature, and that was part of the Bible.
Right,
when we're in the lab, this is how we're going to shoot.
A lot of backlighting, and the moody. It was
Pings
just the way
of light,
it was.
have the flares up the light.
Yeah,
we were bringing in pieces of bevel glass in front of the lens, so things would refract and multiply a little at certain moments.
Yeah, we'd be dialing, and Jens would stand in front of the camera. What were those things? All those different prisms you had.
Yeah.
And just kind of
refract light in these cool
ways. It would look like you're passing through something in the foreground. I wanted to go back to you just talking about using wider lenses closer. I can't remember the title, but there was a film not too long ago. I think that they said they shot, it was in American Cinematographer. They shot the whole movie on like a 21 and a 40.
Yes.
And they moved the camera around to get tighter coverage, but that was...
Oh my God! Now you got to get me because
I mean it's probably not the only one, but it was something I read. It might be 5 years ago.
I'm trying to remember the film.
It's stuck with me.
Sticking to like one focal length is an interesting artistic
but as you
constraint.
move the camera around, it creates different images. And the other thing is that what you were describing about how a face will begin to round as you get if you use a wider
focal
lens.
length and close. Yes.
It's essentially a tiny version of your foreground, midground, background. It creates depth on the face.
Yes. Absolutely.
So you feel like you're right, like you were saying, it's an intimacy barrier that you break.
To put the cherry on the cake one notch further with close focus, with wide angle lenses up close, is you get a close focus wide angle lens.
Yeah.
That has a different personality to it. And what I loved about close focus wide angle lenses as opposed to just wide angle lenses is because it's close focus, you are able to bring it in closer.
Right.
Because of the way the lenses are built, that you're able to get 2 inches, 3 inches away and still hold the focus. And when you do that, when you're bringing it that close and you're working with a close focus lens and you feel the face get round, it's interesting that the ears are way out of focus, but the eyes are sharp.
Yeah. Think about that. You're talking about 4 inches, 5 inches.
But that's a very fantastic emotion.
Oh, totally.
Like of a
because
character
then it's about
that has a nemesis.
eyes.
Oh my God. Just that alone. The choice of lenses. You know what? I got a wide angle lens 21. Okay, blah, blah, blah. You see the button of the point. But now he's saying something that is like a major button, not necessarily said by way of the lines of the script, but his thought.
It could be a reaction.
Like, I'm going to kill this person.
Yeah.
That's the person I'm going to kill.
Yeah.
You know? Okay, that's the moment you want to get in there and he's acting with his eyes.
Right.
The revelation. And then sometimes you get the reflection, which is another thing. I used to love getting reflections in the eyes. You work with lenses like that. And when you are looking at a face and the sides of the face are out of focus, and the ears are way out of focus, which is a thing we don't normally see. I'm looking at you, everything is in focus.
Right.
But imagine if you're putting your nose right up against someone else's nose.
Yeah.
And I've done that.
Yeah.
And I've done that often looking at myself in a mirror, right? When I'm brushing my teeth, after I brush my teeth, I'll put my nose right up against my nose in a mirror.
Yeah, yeah.
It sounds crazy, but I do that often.
Fall off,
And I'm just looking at myself. I'm looking at the eyes. I'm looking to fall off of focus and what's going on and the sculpturalness, the physiognomy of my personal face. And I'm studying it. But when you look at someone nose to nose, you will see this go way out of focus because your eyes are this close to someone else's eyes.
They can't do it.
Yeah.
And it's awkward. You get a shiver. You do it to your wife or whatever, your significant other, just for an experiment, let me put my nose up against your nose and you have a dialogue.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
Yeah.
You feel a different emotion. It's creepy.
Yeah.
Because the things that you see, you don't normally see.
Yeah.
How you intellectualize, how their brain intellectualizes it.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of cinema, of cinematography, is how we shape and manipulate the emotions of an audience. And that's a beautiful thing what we do in our craft.
And it's also something that at whatever aspect that you are in the chain of filmmaking, that what we're really doing is you're the audience, because you want everything you see to be what the audience is supposed to see. You have to think that way. Yes. Everything you do, every setup, every shot, or every cut. Why am I making this cut? Is there something new to see here that's going to move the story along? And it's could be a visual cue, it could be anything.
Yes.
Well, what I love about the process of filmmaking is the pre-production process. I love pre-production because I love sitting around at one table in a conference room. All the key people from every department is there.
Right.
They're putting in the 2 cents. It's a very collaborative medium.
Yeah.
Right. You're hearing everyone's take about how to tell a story and what their particular buttons are.
Yeah.
And you're hearing this collectively and you're learning.
Yes.
You're learning how to tell a story. So to comment on what you just now said, Alec, what's beautiful thing about being a filmmaker is, yes, you are telling your audience what to see and how to feel. You're not doing it consciously to them.
Right.
Because it's their job to interpret it.
You need to be the audience.
Exactly. And we have a right because we're in pre-production for days, for weeks, possibly sometimes for months, looking at one particular sequence, dissecting it.
Yeah.
Every shape, way, and form. We're dissecting a sequence, talking about it for days, for weeks. Who knows it better than us before we get to camera? All right? We want the audience to be horrored and feel horror, feel sadness, feel happiness, particular line. And we dissect it with the script writers, with the directors and the showrunners, and every craft of people pitching in.
Art directors is all the elements.
And when you get to camera, production, it's a fantastic thing. Like, we are telling our story now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right? To our audience. So it's kind of it's not a power thing, but it's such a beautiful, magical feeling that you are controlling a story now.
Yes.
And you just hope that the audience will feel what you want them to feel.
Yeah, and that you have all the pieces to do it. I mean, that's what's fascinating about it too for me. It's kind of reverse engineering everything. When you first go through a sequence in a script and you read it in real time and you kind of have a general idea of what's going to happen. But then, all right, what are all the things we need to do to make that be up here?
That's
and
right.
It's so much fun.
And it goes, I mean, that kind of forethought and attention to detail pays off in the end because it's subliminally communicated. I mean, I found that to be true. It's a different example, but even just in sort of like exercises in film school where you're, assigned some of the earliest things you do are like, tell a 5-minute story, no dialogue. You have to communicate, they'll often hand you just sort of like a piece of paper and the story beats are there. But it goes to show you how much, like, I remember in those early exercises, like, we'd all be handed the same thing and everybody has a different result. And it's like what you bring to the table and your sauce and your weeks or months of planning and like, okay, this color is going to be this, like it does translate in the end. And, it gets noticed. It's like some of these decisions that are seemingly minuscule all go into the soup of what makes a thing unique.
And what I love mostly about being an audience member and a filmmaker on this particular subject is when you're watching a sequence or watching a scene or even just watching a shot of a close-up, and you as an audience member, we all can attest to this, all of a sudden there's a tear rolling down your face, watching. You're watching this film.
Yeah.
And you physically have a tear coming out of your eye of an emotion that you felt, manifested into a physical tear.
Yes.
Of something you just watched. That's a fantastic, powerful feeling of cinema. Now, I'm going to make a bold comment because I'm against the norm with this. I have cried in museums where I look at a painting or look at a photograph. Sometimes I will crack a tear if I'm really overwhelmed with a particular piece. Most people don't. Most people, although you appreciate the work on a museum wall, and you appreciate a Picasso, a Van Gogh, whatever, a Caravaggio, you know, it's hard to have a tear come down your eye.
Yeah.
Let's face it. Let's be real. You're enamored with the work. You appreciate the work. You respect the work. You feel the emotion of the work. But you're not standing in the museum and all of a sudden a tear is coming down your eye. Let's face it. There's a few of us that you'll have a tear. But with cinema, when you have a collective potpourri of all the crafts, telling that one particular point of a story to get that emotion out.
Yeah.
And you feel all the crafts participate.
Yeah, when it all gels, it's
my God.
Yeah. There's nothing like it. I mean,
there's nothing like it.
Yeah, there's so many quotes, obviously, that speak to the difficulty of it. But one of my favorite, or just what you're getting at, which is that, you know, when it's pulled off and an emotion is communicated, there's like nothing else like it. You know, I mean, Kubrick has that quote where it's like trying to make a film is like trying to write like War and Peace on bumper cars, and the entire time you're trying to write it. Things, but when it's done, if it even resembles a quarter of what you were attempting to do. It's such a potent medium, and it's such a. I mean, the beauty of it too is that it is this combination of all the other arts
and
wrapped
it's
into
complex,
one. Like,
and the days can get crazy. I mean, you have to make compromises. A lot of times, I've found over the years too. A lot of times, getting thrown a curveball and having to compromise and do something, you come up with a better idea.
Yes,
for sure.
You know? And what we call that is happy accidents.
Happy accidents.
I love that term.
They are fantastic. And Conrad Hall taught me that watching his films. There was a lot of happy accidents.
Yeah.
And his very famous iconic shot in the Truman Capote film.
The tears. In Cold Blood?
In Cold Blood.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Michael Blake
the
is
tears.
Right?
Yeah.
The rain, reflection.
Yeah.
That was a happy accident.
Yeah.
That whole scene was a happy accident for Conrad Hall.
And that's like the most iconic that's been referenced so many times.
He embraced it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They literally talk about that shot in the Fincher Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. There's like some setup again, this is me watching too many special feature commentary things, but he was directly wanting to reference that for a shot where she's like at home because her character gets raped. It's a pretty heavy movie if you remember. And she's at home kind of, you know, figuring out how she's going to exact vengeance, and they have the shot that was on a techno crane. They did some crazy thing where they pull out of the set, but she's got a heat lamp on that's reflecting red on her face. He's like, it was like my version of the Conrad Hall tears, but like, you know, times 10, where we're going to have this heat lamp and then it pulls back. But it's funny how often that gets referenced because it is one of these like seminal shots.
And what's the other one? The famous one too is the Hitchcock happened to be looking through the camera when they
Zolly.
When they were dolling, and he saw that's what it was.
Which is literally how many times do they do that in Severance? Like every episode.
Severance,
but listen,
Jaws,
let me say one thing which is very profound here now, if I may, especially
Yeah.
to the people out there that are students listening to this.
Yes.
On this particular subject of happy accidents.
Yeah.
There are directors, there are filmmakers that are very storyboard conscious.
Right.
They will do a storyboard in detail.
Exactly what's on the storyboard.
And it's interesting because I've worked with both sides of the fence. Some directors that are storyboard freaks, some directors that do not work with storyboards, some directors that are in the middle. All right? And I've seen the difference. And if I may, speaking about happy accidents, this is something very profound to learn by, is when you are storyboarding a particular project and you're into your storyboard. Some directors are very much into the storyboards. No ifs, ands, or ways. This is how it's going to be. I storyboarded. I thought about the angles. I thought about the shots. I thought about the compositions. I thought about the placement of where to put everything in the story. Yeah. I thought about it very carefully for months and months and months. I worked with a storyboard artist, and here it is. Yeah. Right? But when you get to the set, you got to be able to throw all the storyboards out of your head.
I agree.
Because if the storyboards are in your head and that's all you're doing, you're not aware of these happy accidents.
Yeah.
And as you said, and I observed this, sometimes it's those happy accidents that are the best shots, the best moments, the best emotions.
Yes.
So as a filmmaker, you have to be aware of these happy accidents and not put your blinders on. You got to be open and free. A lot of directors, they spend, and I appreciate strong directors who do this. It's phenomenal. They'll spend weeks, months with a storyboard us in detail doing a storyboard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get to the set, not one time are they looking at their storyboard. And I love that.
Yeah. Well,
because it's in their head. They know it's a backup.
Right.
You just said plan fucks up. They have it there.
That's my process. What I would do is when I do my shot list, I would write down everything that I knew we needed, all the angles.
It's like your grocery list.
I never looked at it. I had it. Yeah. I always had it.
Yes, which is good. That's your job.
And I think the process of writing it, thinking it, imagining it, and writing it down.
It absorbs.
It's absolutely. I always knew everything that was on there.
That's a really good point you made, though. And that's something that, in theory, I think you hear a lot. And I know I've come across it, again, because I'm such a child of the DVD era and listening to commentaries and hearing things from you and absorbing things. It's like, I really have gone too hard on the sort of like YouTube school filmmaking where I just love listening to directors talk about things, which is great. Yeah, but that is a common thread. And it's a really important thing to remember, and learning it, I think, firsthand is a big thing. And I know just even in little projects, again, that I've done, it's like you get to these moments where you're like, yeah, okay, maybe there's a complicated sequence or a thing you really wanted to dial in, but being there on set and being confronted with a pivot or a left turn, you got to, and if you freeze up and you choke and you're like, I
don't know what to do next.
You got to be able to, and again, it's to your point.
Even
it's like
simple things like I remember when we did that Alice in Wonderland wedding.
Yes.
Oh, we had this. We came up with
that
a really
cool box.
That was cool. I remember that.
But we did this cool shot that came up and was twisting around, then came back down into the aisle and pulled all the way back. Right. So we
beautiful
get
shot
this
design.
all set up. Rehearsed. Technocrane broke, and so everything's set up for that. Wow. And it was like, that's going to be 2 hours to get another one over there.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just kind of looked at each other and went, all right. And we kind of went, what are we lit for? And we started picking up all the bits and pieces that we could without breaking down all the work you'd done to light the whole frapping room.
That's what I appreciate about what we do is those two words, the creative spontaneity.
Yes.
I welcome and I want creative
I never minded
spontaneity.
if something it happened on the pier too, where all of a sudden we lost 2 hours. Do you remember that?
I do.
And we had to skip. We had a whole area we were going to shoot in, and we couldn't do any of that.
But getting back to digress for a second about storyboards and creative spontaneity and happy accidents is sometimes when a director is so enamored about their storyboards and they're following it from A to B to C to D, frame by frame, and then the first team would come out and immediately they will change something.
Yeah.
Well,
why would I go over there?
Exactly. Well, I don't think I should be over by the door. Maybe I should be by the window.
Yeah.
All right. And it moved from this part of the set all the way over to this part of the set. Now there's a dialogue between the actors and the director in front of the crew on changing the blocking. And everything just changed. Yeah. Right. Sometimes you succumb to it. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you stick to your guns. Sometimes you respect what an actor wants.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
Totally.
If they feel they got to move this way, you got to give them that license. Okay, we're going to move that way.
Yeah.
But if a director's so enamored with the storyboards, and all of a sudden that first frame just got pulled out like a stack of cards, right?
Yeah.
And the whole thing just collapsed for them. You see them fall apart on the set. They just cannot think anymore.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I've seen that happen with directors. They cannot think.
Yeah.
That first storyboard frame just got pulled out.
Yes.
Now what do I do with the rest? It doesn't work. What am I going to do?
Or some logistical thing. You
that
have
was their
to
crutch.
Flip. Sometimes it's just a physical thing when you get to a location that you may not have been able to spend too much time in. And all of a sudden you have to flip everything because just either for lighting or for some physical thing in the room that will prevent you and have to flip your blocking completely sideways.
Well, that's,
You have to be able to do that.
Now, I'll tell you one point further, since you're speaking to a cinematographer here for your podcast. I also have to think that way as a cinematographer lighting.
Yeah.
Because when you're blocking a set, blocking the rehearsal, we make the marks on the floor.
Right.
It's what I call surgical lighting. I'm not one of those cinematographers that gets into surgical lighting. Yeah. Like you got to hit the mark. Cannot be an inch off the mark, otherwise my light focus is off you. Yeah. It's surgical lighting. You're hitting your marks. I'm not that way because of the creative spontaneity.
Yeah.
When you watch actors on a set, sometimes they are getting into a rhythm, the mojo with the fellow actor. Reading your sides is one thing. It's calculated. All of a sudden, they put the sides away. Right? They come in, and now it's the real deal.
Yeah.
It's different every single time. It's organic. It's natural. Some actors want to be that way. And as a cinematographer, also as a director, you have to observe your team of actors, their personalities. You have to really know how they tick.
Yeah.
All right? On a blocking, how accurate they are or not accurate when they come into shooting. And you got to take these notes in your head.
And some actors, not many, but will, Ted Danson was a perfect example, who would, when he first came on, explain, I'd lean a lot, I do this and that because it's good to know.
Well, he's also just been in front of the camera for so long.
He's self-aware enough that he knows that you are going to need to know this because I'm not going to stay put.
Yeah. Well, I might lean in this far so that you want to take another extra mark, and he will tell that to camera focus puller.
But it all plays into the same thing. You have to. There's got to be room for actors to have some.
There has to be.
Ownership.
You want to keep it organic.
Exactly.
So my lighting, I make pools of light.
Yeah.
I'm not into surgical lighting. I make pools big enough so my actors know from me as a security blanket.
Yeah, they're okay. They're free to move a
Crescenzo,
little bit.
am I able to move here? I always respond, move wherever you want.
Yeah.
And they love me for saying that. I'm not restricting them. I'm not putting something in their mind.
It's
all
probably
of a
a better way to get them to do the actual
Oh.
blocking.
Well, the psychology involved also very good.
Well, there was a great trick.
That's true.
I learned a great trick early on. It said when everybody lands in a location to do a rehearsal, stand, as the director, stand where you want to do your master from. Because the actor will naturally perform to you.
That's a very good point.
And when they land, they'll know immediately if you park yourself where you want to be. They just will naturally play in that direction.
Something.
That's so funny.
I just learned something.
But it was very
that's
valuable.
That's a very good point. And I love that point, and that's so accurate.
It's true. And it just happens.
Because it is I've never really tried my hand at acting in front of the camera. I did a little bit of theater in high school because it was just like a fun, nerdy crowd to hang out with. But I imagine it would be worthwhile. And you took that acting class, which is really interesting because it's just such a different mode of thinking as an actor where the frame can sometimes be a 21 millimeter lens right in your face, and it's not a performance in a proscenium. So it's like you do have to remember that being conscious of like what the actor's bringing and what their sensitivity and intimacy is. Like if you strangle them with you can only move here and you hit this and this, then all of a sudden they're going to be like, how do I even?
They can't think
exactly.
Right? It becomes too cerebral,
exactly,
too calculated,
right? And
they hate you for
exactly.
that. It takes them out of their job.
Just
you
think
want
about
them to
today
feel
when we were giving you golf advice.
Oh yeah, this
trying
morning.
to think of 10. Trying to think of 10 things at the same time. So try to play a scene.
I would get thrown.
Have to hit 3 marks.
I mean, obviously, I think actors who are good at their craft are able to kind of juggle both things and be like, I can be conscious of the lens and also do the thing. But it's
what Shenzo's saying.
That's
it's
experience.
Important.
It takes experience to get to that place.
Like
giving them
a little bit of agency and room to move,
to
roam a little bit. It's very important.
Very important.
Because you don't want to smother them, and then they feel like they can't.
I mean, there are always exceptions where there's a special shot that's very specific.
Yeah,
and you but that's maybe a beat that you perform.
Alex, I have to say, 40 plus years shooting, being in this business, I learned something with one of your comments that you just said, and I love you for that. It was a very interesting thing that I just learned here. About when you block, stand in the environment where you want your master to be.
Yeah.
Never heard that before.
Yeah, that's the first time I heard it too.
I love that.
Yeah, I stole that and I use it all the time. And I remember the first time I was like, wow, it works.
Because as a cinematographer, where I was going with this, it's so important to me when you work with the director or actors is that master.
Yeah.
That's all I care about is what side of the line
where's my source? And,
So sometimes when you're in a room,
right,
and one side has windows and the other 3 walls do not, for me as a cinematographer, selfishly, I want to place my master in a way where those windows become the edge light, not the front light, because then it gets flat and boring.
Yeah.
All cinematographers feel that same way. When you're lighting with key light and fill light, if the camera's here, you don't want that key light to be on the flat side of the camera because then it looks flat.
Yeah.
You want it to be on the rim side, on the back side. So The most important thing for me as a cinematographer when I get to the set to block, and I don't position myself what you just said with a director. That's an interesting thing. I'm gonna learn that. I'm gonna do that with a director because we're all over the place when we look. We're not conscious of that. I was never conscious of that. But afterwards, blocked, the director and I would discuss, okay, where do you want the camera to be for the master? Then you get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then sometimes the actors, you
might have to
Exactly. That's the plus of what you just said.
Yeah.
If you're already there and they're playing to you, reading the sides, they're kind of used to it already.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, and I love that.
It's
Rather than
it's a
retool
non-invasive way of sort of,
I love that. But where the windows are is the most important thing for
right.
And I learned that.
You're keeping
I
your eye
learned
on
that
that.
over the few episodes, and I remember now, like anytime I walk onto a set now, it's like, where do you want a key light from?
Yeah.
I want to know that.
That's all.
I'm going to scout, so then I'll block it in
Exactly.
a way that will embrace that.
That makes sense. I do briefly
And
have
then
to
from
interject.
there, the rest will fall into place.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
Then do whatever you want, as long as I know that our side is on the correct side.
Yes.
So it looks as best as it's going to possibly be. Not
Yeah.
to be selfish, but it's going to carve.
Well, then that's
You're
important.
It's going to
protecting
carve
that.
90 shots you're about to do now.
Yeah.
90 of them.
Yeah.
You know, if you're on one bad shot in that mask, and now you got 90 bad shots that are flat and ugly.
Exactly. That's
what
the
I'm saying?
parent of all the
Well, but
You
that's-
want to plant that
absolutely
seed. That's
true.
all. Let it blossom
That's
the
a
way
good
you
point.
want, but you want to plant that seed in the right way
Yes.
so the tree grows and the leaves grow in the right way.
I like
Everything
that
looks
metaphor. I like that metaphor. No, I was just going to say on the point too of being able to working on a show that's high pressure, right? Where you have certain hard deadlines to hit. There's less latitude. It feels like TV kept you at a certain pace, right? That maybe like a feature is a bit more.
It was
loose,
disciplined,
right?
very heavily disciplined in terms of
you've
pace
got-
and schedule.
You have to do a lot of work in a specific amount of time.
But
It's all mathematics,
Right,
It's all
exactly.
mathematics. You read the call sheet, you read the shot list, you read the one-liners.
Yeah.
You break down the script. You got 12 hours a day.
Right.
7-8 pages.
How many
in a
setups?
series.
Yeah.
And it comes down to mathematics. Well,
Yeah.
we only got an hour and a half to shoot that, but 45 minutes to shoot that and a half hour to shoot this.
Yes.
And you write all your timelines. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That there's specific times to make your 12-hour day. You don't want to go a minute over because it's this.
Exactly.
Right? And
Yeah.
as a cinematographer and as a director,
Yeah.
our job,
Yeah.
one of our jobs, very important job, stay on time.
Yeah.
Well,
Because it's this.
Yes.
It's funny you brought that up because when I've gone on to shows that I've come on as a guest director, and you have that meeting with your first, and they're going, "Well, how long is it going to take you to shoot this?" And it's like, it's not going to take me that long, but I don't know. I haven't worked with your
Right.
crew or
Because
the
there's a
DP. I
process
don't.
A lot of
involved,
variables.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, how
A
can
lot of
I answer
variables.
that?
Yeah, I mean,
They should know how long that
Takes an
gonna
army,
take.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
literally.
I mean, I never was able to. It's like
And that's what makes it nerve-wracking, right,
Yeah.
Alec? Because you get to a set, your heart is doing this immediately.
yeah, the
Yeah.
Fingers
clock
are
is going like
oh
that.
my God, I hope all the stars line up.
That's what,
know?
again, I'm full of these quotes, but I think it was Kubrick who said the bravest thing you can do is stepping out of the car in the morning to go into.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he's
I
right.
love that quote, by the way, and that's so true.
It's just like the terror of
and
getting there.
Spielberg also said
Yeah,
that. 'cause
actually,
he
maybe it
learned
was
that from-
Spielberg.
He
Yes,
learned that from
he
Kubrick.
did. Just get out of the car.
He said the
start
same
the
thing.
day.
When I get out of the car, I'm already vomiting.
Yeah.
To hear that from a legend,
Yeah.
that they get really nervous that they're,
I know.
they're
Well,
vomiting already.
it's very
It always
comforting
made
to
me
hear
feel
that.
better
Yeah.
too, because as much as we bitch about like a schedule on television, the features are the same.
It's I
It's
guess
just
that's what I
different.
was getting at
They may
too.
have more
It's
time
like,
to shoot stuff, but
Yeah.
they have the same time pressures. And every director I've ever heard interviewed, I don't care what A-lister it is,
yeah.
they've never had enough time.
I know
Like,
there was
you know.
that whole thing, the Coen brothers after True Grit, which they had won the Oscar for No Country and were probably enjoying the most
a
latitude.
perfect film, by the way.
Well, I mean, they're such good craftsmen.
we
talked
broke
about them.
down.
That's a perfect
Miller's
film.
Yeah.
We did Miller's Crossing.
Again, editors. I do think editors make great directors.
They
That's
are.
my
They
deal.
do.
They did.
But they said something in a DGA interview or something where they were like, yeah, even on True Grit, they were finishing days being like, God damn it, we wanted to do another setup or this wasn't right. So it's like,
Yeah.
it is comforting to hear people who are humble like that and are willing to humble themselves and be like, yeah, we're Oscar-winning
what's
filmmakers,
there's
but
the great Cameron Crowe, Billy Wilder thing. I think Cameron Crowe was on the lot prepping a movie, and Billy Wilder still had an office there. And so they bumped into each other, and I don't know if he'd met him yet or they were chatting, and he said, "Oh, you're at Paramount?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Do they still have that little flower shop on Melrose after you make the right-hand turn?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's still there." And he goes, "Yeah, it was right about there when I'd say, oh, shit, I wish we'd done this." And this is Billy Wilder. So it's like...
But if I may, I'm going to regress for a second about schedule.
Yes,
There's a thing that I observe that I always bring up with my first assistant director during prep. A lot of them chuckle. A lot of them think I'm crazy when we're breaking it down as to how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
And this is one thing that I always bring up that's part of the equation that I find it strange that a lot of people don't really acknowledge. And we have experience.
Yeah.
And that is how much time it takes for an actor when they come out from hair and makeup, ready to
actually be ready to shoot.
To be ready to shoot. Like, you're making a shot list so precise. Well, it's 15 minutes for that, 20 minutes for that. We got an hour for this. Blah, blah. Everything is so precise to the minute. And then I would say, well, that first shot, how long is it going to take for an actor working with a director, describing the shot, describing the scene? Some actors, as you know, I've witnessed this myself. They would come to the set and they would talk about a scene that they're about to do for 25 minutes, sometimes a half hour. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Yes. With all due respect.
The process that they need to go through.
You have to respect it because now they're thinking the motivation, where they're coming from, where they're going to. Now they're talking about the script. Now they're talking about the story.
Right.
They're trying to peel the veneer layers apart so they can understand what the director wants for them for this particular scene. And they get into it.
Yeah.
They get into it on the set. Monies are rolling, cameras standing by the roll, and they get into it. And it's bizarre sometimes that some actors, it's not 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most. Some actors, because you go down a rabbit hole with a conversation sometimes. Oh my God, you're looking at your watch.
I know.
20 minutes. Everyone's face is turning white. The first 8
20 minutes is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, right? Now, it's a domino effect.
Right.
Your whole day is shot.
Yeah, where are we going to get that back?
Then that starts, exactly.
Oh my God. So I always try to make it clear to the assistant director when we're doing this, and it depends on what actors are there.
Yeah.
Please make sure you give enough time and have a conversation with your director. Don't worry about it. We're just going to talk about we're ready to go in 5 minutes. Don't worry, we're ready to go in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it never happens that way. But you have to respect that because now it's their job to get into the character, respect that process of conversing with the director. Yes, most of that should be done beforehand.
Yeah, I mean,
but in a TV grind,
when you're lighting. That's when that conversation can happen over with the writer and the director.
And but you're on a TV schedule
Exactly.
too. Oh
they don't always get that FaceTime with the director to maybe talk about the scene in a way that they want to.
And there lies the rub.
Exactly.
I mean, I always tried to make it clear to an actor that if they wanted to talk about stuff, I'm here. Once the set's turned over for lighting.
But they're also, you guys were staggered, so they're shooting while you're prepping.
Well, that'd be one.
It's hard.
One day an episode, there would be an overlap.
It's hard. I have a tremendous respect for filmmakers who are in the television genre.
Yeah.
Because it's the hardest genre of all of them. And every filmmaker would tell you this.
Yeah.
The TV episodic 1 hour drama is the hardest, most painful genre to do because you're on a regimented schedule. Everything is calculated by the minute. So much stress. You're leapfrogging. You're doing 20 episodes a season. Now it's 6, 8, whatever. But, and it all comes down to mathematics, and it's the time that it takes.
Yeah.
So much stress, and you got to be quick on your feet.
Right.
Got to be quick on your feet. Sometimes
be creative. That's the thing with all the other things. It's like that's the real.
Sometimes
magic.
Television looks the way it is. It looks television, an over the shoulder, two-shot master. Let's go.
Yeah.
It becomes formulaic. But what separates the good shows now, and we have a lot of great shows right now, is they know how to be creative in that same amount of time.
Right.
Yeah.
And not be formulaic.
It's what you do with
and
that
that's
time.
what separates the men from the boys, the girls from the women. When they read the script, to know that this is their parameters, this is their allotment of time.
Yep.
Okay, what am I going to do? And also, Alec, you taught me a very important lesson, if I may, to get off track for a second, which was a beautiful thing. Sometimes we would run behind on a sequence, right? You look at your one-liner, well, we were supposed to be here for 45 minutes. We're now going into 70 minutes. We're 15 minutes beyond already.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. But, and you would sometimes say to me, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I got something up my sleeve. Don't worry about it. And I'm sweating my bullets because I know the next scene, oh, my God, it's an important scene. But, now we got half the amount of time to shoot.
Yeah.
And then Alec would tell me at the very last minute, this is going to be a oneer. This is going to be a oneer.
Yeah.
We'll put in a little extra time to rehearse it, but once we shoot it, it's going to be one shot. It's a oneer. And we make up the time with one swing of that bat.
Yeah.
Because he was thinking ahead that, okay, we're running behind.
Yeah, where can I pull that up?
We're running behind for a reason because this is a very important sequence. I'm going to invest in it now, knowing that the next sequence may not be as important. I can get away with the oneer and still tell its story and be responsible to the schedule to make up the time. And that's the part of what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be able to pivot
as a
like
whole,
that.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
I thought you were going to use it's actually an old John Heath thing. Get behind early because you have more time to catch up. I said that a few times, but it's true. And it's like, you got to, I was always cool about thinking ahead. Some directors don't, and I respect it. They're doing scene 5 and that's all they're thinking
that's all
about.
they're concentrating
but
on.
once we'd turn over, if we were flipping a room and you were lighting and I knew we were at that point, I'd grab whoever the first was, and maybe
you have to
and go. This is where we're going to be next. So you could start pulling that wall out.
In this genre, yes.
Well, that's
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's that saves a lot of time. It's like, we're going to be over here next, so let's start moving all that shit out of there.
And to know that you're going to pull a wall out because that's where you want the camera to be on the next scene. That you're not there yet is valuable.
Yeah, you walk over and you're ready to light after the rehearsal.
Taking advantage of those gap times, though. I mean, I feel like comical how much I've like quoted Kubrick and Spielberg and all these guys, but there is another really good Kubrick quote where he talks about, I think it was when he was making Barry Lyndon, and he talks about how much he loved playing chess, and that in a chess game, there's a cadence to making a move, maybe stepping away, and he's like, it's those moments in between where you're still thinking about the next move, but you can step away, refill your coffee. He's like, that's kind of filmmaking for me, where it's like, I know we're lighting for this, but you also got to have your eye on what's the next.
I'm glad you said that because I was going to bring that up, but
yes.
you beat me to the punch. Is that I feel very, very strongly that to be a filmmaker, you must learn the game of chess. Because chess is a very powerful game.
I love it. I have nobody to play with.
I'll play with. What are you talking about?
I'll play with you, but I mean that I regularly.
Yeah, sure.
I'd be happy to.
It's such an important game because of what you just said. With chess,
got to think ahead.
You are thinking 4, 5, 6, sometimes 10 steps ahead.
Exactly.
And that's what we have to do on a set, especially as a director, a first assistant director, a cinematographer. Thinking ahead. You have to think ahead.
That's actually a good analogy.
You have to think ahead.
Because it's not only that, you may be thinking 10 steps ahead and then your opponent does something that completely fucks all that up. You need to be able to, all right, that's not what I was trying to lure you into is now a closed door.
Well, like for instance, Alec, 10 steps ahead.
Yeah.
You look at the shot list.
Yeah.
Right? 12-hour day. Started at 7, we end at 7, whatever. All right, there's still light at the end of the day. So in shot listed, our last shot is outside.
Yeah.
Right? We're on the second shot now in the day at 8 o'clock in the morning, thinking 10 steps ahead.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the last shot is outside, but this is how it's going. This is the rhythm. I'm smelling something now, getting a little behind, but I'm thinking about 10 steps ahead what that last shot is. Sun is going down.
Yeah.
Cinematographers get nervous because that's our light. Can't do anything. I can't place a light when I'm lighting a field.
Yeah.
Right? That's sun. And you shot listing and you pre-production.
You plan on
where that sun is, where the company is. You're not looking this way, you're looking this way because that's where the sun is.
Right. Exactly.
And the whole 200 trucks of tractor trailers of equipment are parked over there and not in your shot.
Yep.
Planning, right?
Yep.
Usually the porta potties always ended up in the shot
but the sun is going down.
Easy to move.
It's overcast, whatever. But you're thinking sometimes in the middle of a shot, you're going outside, you're watching the weather.
Yeah.
The storm is coming in, clouds are coming in. We're not going to have the light. It's going to get darker sooner than we thought.
Right.
You're thinking 10 steps ahead. The very important word in what we do is contingency.
Yeah.
You want contingencies, creative contingencies in your head to prepare.
Yeah.
All right. And we're trained for that. It's an occupational hazard.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about contingencies, you know.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm going to be funny for a second, but another occupational hazard is, you know, call times, right? We have a 7 o'clock call time, 5 o'clock call time. We're on the set an hour early.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We're always early.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're ever late to a set once, you will learn that lesson really fast. Right? You don't want to ever be late again. Because it's like $1,600 a minute production time.
Oh, God.
And that first shot of the day is very important, especially to a cinematographer.
Of course.
Because the whole crew is there.
They're looking at you.
wondering what to pull off the truck.
Right.
What equipment are we pulling off the truck? What are we doing? Which way are we looking?
Yeah.
We know which way we're looking. They don't necessarily know which way to looking. You know, staging the equipment.
Yeah, even though we talk about that at the Tech Scout, it doesn't translate all the way.
So
down
you get
to,
late. It doesn't. So you get late to the set, and all of a sudden you got 80 people looking at you. You got the producers, the AD looking at the watches. Your heart is like this. I got stuck in traffic. Oh my God, it was an accident. You just cost the company like $20,000 in a half hour because they're waiting for you. No one can do anything. You can't delegate anything until you get there to know what you're pulling off the truck. Do we want a 10K? Do we want a condor on a lift? Which, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So the contingency, what I was about to say in the long story short is we're always early for our call times. We're always early to the set. So you can be comfortable, relax. You got to the set on time.
Yeah. You were early today to get for this.
Well, that goes to that.
You can have your cup of coffee. I like walking around the set.
Yeah.
Before I start shooting the day, just to look around, to get some ideas.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll have my keys with me, give them a broad stroke of the day, what I'm going to do.
I know with you, we've at the end of a day, a lot of times we may walk to where we're going to start the morning.
And that's thinking 10 steps ahead.
Look at that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But where I was going with this, to be a little funny with it, an occupational hazard, when I go to a fancy restaurant with my girl or whatever, right?
Yeah.
We got a 5 o'clock reservation, a 7 o'clock reservation. I am there an hour and a half early. I am not kidding. And she hates me for that because we're in the car. We're getting on our phones. We're trying to milk as much time as we can, returning emails on our phones. Crescenzo, we've got an hour still. We walk around the block. What do we do? It's crazy. I'm always early no matter where I go because it's an occupational hazard.
Yeah. I mean, it is good to
crazy.
condition yourself to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I only know sort of from my PA day playing days where I did actually PA a little bit on CSI, but then when I moved to New York, that was really kind of where that was the grind.
Yeah,
I learned. I was on The Good Wife, and I showed up late to call time in Lefferts Gardens or something. I had to take multiple trains to get there, and had some excuse where I was like, "Oh God, I'm sorry." And I just remember the second
I'm a
being
fanatic going to an airport.
we started at 7.
Oh, me too. Airports.
I want to be there 5 hours early.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, that's.
Oh my God, my
don't
girl
even get
says,
me
"Well,
started.
it's an hour to stand on the line. TSA, no problem, go through." Really?
Yeah.
Really? You're gonna be on the line, 3 hours.
I would rather
I want
just
contingencies.
Absolutely
Go in there.
I'm not
relax.
missing the plane. And when you miss a plane one time, you realize,
for sure.
I'm going to be at home pacing back and forth anyway
Yeah,
with
yeah.
my car service.
Or
I might as well
different.
pace there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And be comfortable.
I am you're preaching to the choir.
Why
I love
people
it.
don't get that?
Oh, I've had to travel with work colleagues before where you're with a group of people who the majority of them like to cut it close, and you're just kind of
they thrive on that.
Man,
they thrive on that.
I hated it.
Oh
I
my
was in
God.
New York recently with somebody, and it was they just like to cut it close, and I was like, it was killing me. I was like, I can't.
And I tell my friends and my girl all the time, I have enough stress in my life.
Yeah, why
I have enough
introduce more?
stress.
Literally,
Contingencies. You're thinking ahead, playing chess.
Well,
Yes.
filmmaker tools.
It's true. Well, I think we should bring a chessboard out next time. Maybe do a little a set deck.
Just
work.
to have it. I have one right there.
Yeah.
It was at this point that we realized our conversation with Crescenzo was going to spread out over 2 episodes. So this is the end of part 1.